Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to future tech trends and innovation in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Greetings and salutations, and a warm welcome back to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Now, believe it or not, when I'm not writing or producing or recording a daily podcast, I listen to podcasts too, especially when walking my dog or going for a run. Now, I recently came across a cool podcast about the future of smart homes hosted by Andrew Weinreich, who is a social networking pioneer and founder of not one, two, three, four, or even five tech startups, but seven, including 6degrees, which was the world's first social network. In predicting our future, he interviews leading entrepreneurs to predict massive opportunities for the next generation of startup founders that are going to change the world. Now, Andrew does have a knack of uncovering the next big trends in technology and then building successful companies on the back of it, and as a result has established his own unique position within that tech startup world. He's currently the founder of startup launchpad Andrew's Roadmaps and chairman of data analytics startup Indicative, as well as an advisor to a number of startups. That was enough for me to get him on the show today, so buckle up, hold on tight, so I can beam your ears all the way to Brooklyn so we can speak with Andrew Weinreich. Andrew Weinreich, you are a social networking pioneer, founder of 7 startups, including 6degrees, which I believe was the world's first social network. And I thought I span a lot of plates. Welcome to the show. How is life treating you in 2018 so far?
So far, so good. Very hectic. Lots of work ahead for the year, but I'm excited about everything I'm working on.
Now, can you tell me more about your apparent knack for uncovering the latest, next big trends in technology and then also building a successful company on top of those trends?
So the first company, as you mentioned, was 6degrees. And the focus there was, this was 1996, we launched in 1997, was could I fundamentally change the way people networked by getting everyone to index their relationships in a single place, so that you could see the people you don't know through the people you do. And what excited me for that opportunity, and for every opportunity since, has been trying to identify places where I thought there was an inevitability to coming disruption. In other words, things that would happen with or without me, but because I believed they were an inevitability, I could play a significant role in accelerating them. So by that I mean, with 6degrees, once everyone had a means to connect to the internet, I thought it was an inevitability that people would look to essentially index their relationships. And that's the foundational element of every social network. And all of the companies that I started since, I tried to identify what I thought were inevitabilities. So I started a business bringing Wi-Fi to public places, coffee shops, hotels. I thought it was an inevitability that people would demand high-speed connectivity in public places. I thought it was an inevitability that people would, that fundraising for political campaigns would move online. I thought it was an inevitability that dating would move from a desktop experience to a mobile experience. And that's been my focus always, is to try to research areas where I could then get a sense of coming inevitabilities and start companies that leverage those inevitabilities.
So I've got to ask you then, because I mean, at the moment, one of the big trends that I see personally in the world that I frequent is the use of blockchain and cryptos and that whole world. Do you see that as an inevitability now, or is it still very much up for grabs still, do you think?
Let's talk about what blockchain is. Blockchain is this decentralized, essentially this decentralized network, or this decentralized technology that allows for the memorialization of some type of record that is unalterable. And the question that has to be asked when you think about blockchain is, where are there instances of us having inefficiencies or inaccurate records that could be perfected with blockchain? And so one that comes to mind right away has to do with title. Title is when you purchase a piece of property, when you purchase an apartment or a home, title is a reflection of your absolute ownership of that property and that there are no competing claims. And for those people that aren't homeowners, There are many, many instances where someone buys a piece of property only to later find that someone else has a claim or someone else bought that same piece of property. And so what title insurance is you're essentially buying a policy on the fact that you actually own what you bought. Well, because there is such a problem with, actually more than people know, associated with competing claims to property, that's the type of problem that can be solved with blockchain technologies. And that opportunity to create a ledger that is unalterable, that is distributed, adds value in many, many, many types of transactions. So when I think about inevitabilities, yes, a distributed ledger that can perfect different types of transactions is an inevitability and is here to stay. And the opportunity for entrepreneurs or the opportunity for investors is to try to identify where that opportunity perfects certain industries. And I think we're at the earliest part of that curve. So someone told me, someone was trying to analogize this for me to where we were with the internet, and that if you had invested in the internet, in internet companies in 96, 97, 98, for example, Google and Facebook would not have been around. And if you had invested in 98, 99, you might have thought that Yahoo was the search engine of the future. Well, it turns out that was completely wrong. I think from an investment perspective, it's an interesting question whether or not the big currencies that everyone are aware of are the Yahoos of today or whether they're the Googles of today. And that's a interesting question, which I don't have a good answer to, or at least not right now. But I do think the underlying technology of blockchain will be disruptive and is an inevitability.
So I've got to ask as well, where did your story begin? What was the moment that led you down this path into the world of tech startups?
I was briefly in investment banking, and then I went to law school. And out of law school, my first job was as an attorney in-house advisor. And there was a job opening at a PC clone manufacturer in New York that paid so little, I don't think anyone else wanted the job. So ordinarily, you wouldn't get a job as a general counsel a couple of years out of school. But I got that job, and I was fascinated by technology, and I was fascinated by all the excitement around the internet. And I was fascinated by this paradigm shift where prior to the internet, only those that had amassed a great deal of capital could be publishers of any sort. And that was my first fascination with this idea of coming disruptions and inevitabilities. And all of a sudden, the great paradigm shift was that because everyone had access to the internet, everyone could become a publisher. And I think those people that were intrigued by early opportunities, a lot of them were focused on this content creation and this question of where can people now create content at scale or be influencers where they theretofore were not able to. And so that construct fascinated me, and 6 Degrees really came out of that first dynamic of what felt like a leveling of the playing field.
Now, we've spoken to over 400 startups on this podcast, and also lucky to have listeners on their own startup journey in over 160 different countries. So can you tell me a little bit more about how you help startups with Andrew's roadmaps, and also what makes your service unique from other solutions or services that are out there?
So Andrew's roadmaps is a weekend boot camp designed to equip startup founders with the essentials of all the disciplines they would need to know to be successful entrepreneurs. And so it starts with this appreciation I have that successful entrepreneurs have a base level of understanding in every discipline they'll confront. In other words, they don't need to be an expert in every area, but you can't manage an SEO campaign or you can't even manage a marketer who is engaged in an SEO or an SEM campaign without fundamentally understanding what those things are. You can't manage product development if you don't have a sense of what it means to architect a product and set forth what a product design or product specification documents look like. You can't raise capital unless you understand the basics of finance, of startup finance. And so what I try to do is define what this minimum threshold of knowledge is in all of the disciplines you'll confront, and then equip people with best practices in all of those areas.
Now, given the fact of your background and the fact you've got a fantastic voice as well, I'm not too surprised to find that you've got your own podcast out now called Predicting Our Future. And I believe that it's a tech podcast that envisions the future through a serial entrepreneur's eyes. So can you tell me a little bit more about what that show entails, without stealing too many of my listeners, of course?
Well, so what I try to do is, we've done 3 seasons.
Yeah.
And a season I define as an area where I'm going to do a deep dive and investigate a specific vertical where I think there could be massive disruption. So I don't believe, as an outsider, you can just look at a space and say, let me tell you how healthcare is going to be disrupted. Let me tell you how aerospace is going to be disrupted. I think what you really need to do is, your starting point is speak with the smartest people in the space. So what I do is I identify a space. For example, the first space I looked at was factory-built housing. And I'm intrigued by that because every single thing we have that we use, from your computer to your coffee mug, is made in a factory, but homes and apartment buildings in particular are not. It intrigued me immensely. How is it, or why is it, that homes and apartment buildings aren't made in factories? Now, to some extent they are, but why aren't they at scale? And is it an inevitability that they will be? And then what I do is, for this particular series, I went out and spoke with every single startup I could find that was venture-backed, that's trying to attack this problem at scale. And then I spoke with analogous industries that I thought would have, or people, I should say, experts in analogous industries that I thought would have important insights on this. So, for example, I spoke with a professor at the University of Michigan who's written 13 books on the Toyota Way. And I spoke with someone at a lead designer at Fincantieri, the largest cruise line builder in Europe, because there are analogies between cruise shipbuilding and modular building. And only after conducting 30 hours of interviews, then did I put together a 7-part series on factory-built housing. And I did the same for election software. And I just did the same for smart homes. So that's what I do in the podcast, is I try to do very, very deep dives and not just offer my insights, my predictions about what disruption will look like, but I try to share with people my methodology, if you're an entrepreneur, how I would go about looking at a space. And then I encourage entrepreneurs to think about riding waves. So if you identify a space that you're passionate about, that intrigues you, then what I try to do is say to people, the starting point is you should speak with the smartest people you can in the space. And that usually is startup founders, and then some industry people, and then perhaps some academics. And so hopefully it provides both an insight into the space and a framework, a process for entrepreneurs to examine spaces that I don't examine.
So why a podcast? I mean, what made you launch Predicting Our Future? And also, how's the show been received so far after 3 seasons?
The show's been received very well. I mean, we in the industries we go into, we get broad circulation, and then I end up speaking at conferences on the topic. In fact, one of the interesting things, I delivered a keynote at a builders conference on factory-built housing, and I started the talk by saying, it's worth pointing out that collectively you all have hundreds of years and have built thousands, tens of thousands of houses or apartments, and your keynote lecturer has no experience. And then I put up a slide of Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and Steve Jobs, and I said, what do these people have in common? And I said, what they have in common is they all had no experience in the industries they disrupted. So Bezos had no experience in retail. Steve Jobs had no experience with phones. In fact, the leading phone companies prior to Apple's introduction of the iPhone was Motorola, Nokia, and Ericsson, none of which exist in the form, or exist, but certainly in the form they did previously. And then Elon Musk, of course, had no experience in cars and a real experience. And so it's been very well received. And this notion of not just my thoughts about the future, but this methodology and this idea of outsiders coming in, deconstructing a process, and then reconstructing that process has been proven time and again as the way that an industry gets disrupted. So all of that, I think, has been very well received.
Fantastic. So what are the most significant lessons that you've learnt during your time with these multiple startups in your boot camps? And also, what advice would you offer anyone listening on their own startup journey right now?
There's so many places to offer advice. One is for those people that haven't identified an idea. I love the idea of trying to find the intersection of what you're passionate about with a deep undertaking of learning, searching for the inevitability in the space. And that process, I think, can lead you to an idea that you can hold on to and persist with for a period of time. Now, that's how you come up with an idea. I would say one of the things I found about startups is the best ones usually go through extraordinary highs and lows, and you're able to gauge the likely success at the outset based on whether you believe the CEO has the fortitude to stay with this project of hers or his for 10 years. And so that's the second element, right? How you identify the idea, this fortitude, this persistence over a period of time. And then a good CEO will try to appreciate best practices and develop this level of proficiency in all of the disciplines that she will confront. And so those are at a very high level, the three pieces of advice or three elements that I look for in trying to identify good CEOs.
Now, you've already enjoyed an incredible success, but what does 2018 have in store for you? I mean, your podcast and Andrew's roadmaps as well. What are your plans there? And are there anything else that you can share with us today about those plans?
So it's more of the same for the podcast. I'm also the chairman of a business analytics company called Indicative that's doing quite well. And we've launched a second podcast called Deciding by Data, where we're interviewing leaders in product. These are technologists, but leaders in product and in industry that are making decisions about how to build product and how to engage in their marketing efforts based on data. And so that's the essence of this new podcast that we're offering in addition to Predicting Our Future.
Well, a huge thank you for coming on the show today. But before I do let you go, can you tell the listeners where they can find you on the web, your social channels, and also the best way to contact you if they've got any questions after listening to our conversation today? You can
find contact information for me at andrewsroadmaps.com or predictingourfuture.com. Twitter, I'm at andrewsroadmaps. And any of those channels will give you a connection to me. And I'm always interested in hearing new ideas, new thoughts. Would love to hear from you. One of the things I love about what you're doing there is how you are actually uncovering the next big trends in technology. So for those reasons alone, I will be subscribing to your podcast too, because I'm a sucker for listening to podcasts as well as recording them. But more than anything, just a big thank you for taking the time to come on and share your story today. Thank you. The founder of 7 tech startups, including 6 Degrees, the world's first social network, and host of a podcast. Man, I thought I span a lot of plates. Seriously though, I really enjoyed chatting with Andrew today, and it's not just because of getting to see life through a serial entrepreneur's eyes, but it's the real value in being able to learn from someone that has been the founder of 7 startups. Hey, can you stop and think about that just for a moment? You know, how many challenges, dips, opportunities and experience has he gone through across those 7 tech startups? Because for me, it's that valuable experience that is really enjoyable and valuable to tap into. And why I do this. I do think we should listen and learn more from those that have been on that path before, rather than just make expensive mistakes. But hey, as a child, my parents always said, don't do that, Neil, or you'll fall over and hurt yourself. And guess what? It wasn't until I did fall over and hurt myself that I learned my lesson. But I guess it's only a problem if you keep repeating the same mistakes and not learning from them. But hey, I digressed a little bit there, didn't I? A big thank you for listening to the show today. Remember that you can find the contact details and so much more over at my website, techblogwriter.co.uk/podcast. But it's time for me to go now. So a big thank you to Andrew for coming on the show today. And an even bigger thank you to you, my loyal audience, for taking the time to tune in. So all that's left for me to say is until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.